Hello, beautiful, and thank you for being here because we are talking about a question that I get a lot, and I bet that you've thought it once or twice as well. And it is, how do I eat intuitively? How can I pursue food freedom when I have health concerns? So, if you've ever wondered that, we are going to dive into it in this episode. So, let's get into it. Welcome to the Live Unrestricted podcast, a show where you'll learn how to heal your relationship with food and your body so that you can focus your time and energy on more important things like your personal growth. I'm your host, Sabrina Magna, food freedom coach, and my mission is to help make your life happier and healthier without stress, overwhelm, or guilt about food. If you love the show, please do go out and share it. And if you're looking for support with your relationship with food, details about my programs are in the show notes. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's jump in. All right. Welcome, my friend. I'm so happy that you're here, and you should be really proud of yourself because the fact that you pressed play, that you are taking the time out of your day to listen to this, it tells me something about you. It tells me that you care about your health, you care about your well-being, and you want to figure out how to navigate this whole world of eating intuitively, of having a healthy relationship with food when you also want to take care of your health, right? If you're listening to this, then there might be a good chance that you have been in diet culture, dieting, restricting, following food rules for some time. And we have, as a society, been conditioned to think that the way to care for your health, to really prioritize your well-being, is through these extreme strategies of cutting out foods or micromanaging, counting your calories. And I used to feel the exact same way. I remember leading up to my trip in Italy, which was years ago. And if you haven't heard about that, then go back to episode 1 where I talk about kind of my own origin story and how I got to doing the work that I do today. But for years, I truly thought that I was doing what was best for my health, that if I wanted to be healthy, then I needed to be afraid of eating white bread, that I needed to be afraid of carbs, and I couldn't possibly have a slice of pizza and still be healthy. I had a very skewed idea of what it meant. And I remember going to Italy and I know that there's this thought that goes through everyone's mind of, well, of course, in Italy, the food is fresher, it's better for you. And I agree with you 100%. Like, what they put in their food is very different. What really stuck out to me is that it was this perspective around eating that positively influenced people's behaviors. There wasn't binge eating. No one did cheat meals. People weren't talking about having to make up for their calories by going to the gym. And that really planted this seed in my mind of like, oh my goodness, what if my whole perspective on quote unquote health is wrong? And this idea that we especially have in North America around these like very rigid, structure-based rules when it comes to exercise and food and self-care, what if that's not necessarily the path to well-being? So that really planted the seed for me. And of course, it wasn't this overnight kind of transformation. For me, I had to experience a lot of trial and error and spent years researching everything that there is to know about eating disorders and binge eating and emotional eating and food obsession in order to truly understand the psychology behind our eating patterns. So all that to say, if you have a hard time wrapping your head around this idea that you could have this non-rigid, controlling relationship with food while also navigating health concerns and challenges, I get it. And a lot of my clients who come into Food Freedom Academy have this same kind of perspective. So let's set the stage. And before I do that, I just want to say a quick aside. If you're noticing that my voice is a little nasally or I sound a little different, it's because I am getting over a cold and I have been sick for the past few days and I truly feel like I can't breathe out of my nose still. So I really wanted to record this podcast. I wanted to talk about this, but I can't fully breathe through my nose. So just wanted to call out the elephant in the room. But really, let's go ahead and set the stage. Let's say that you have done it all. You've tried every diet under the sun, and you find yourself to that breaking point where you're feeling more obsessed and out of control with food than ever before. You have been hearing about intuitive eating. You want to pursue food freedom. You want to learn how to deconstruct, unlearn these deep-rooted mindsets around food that might create this all or nothing mentality, these very extreme perspectives and views, these obsessive habits, and you want to learn how quote unquote normal eaters do it, how we think about food, how we navigate this world of sustainable eating that does not cut out foods, that allows us to be peaceful, to enjoy it, to really just listen to our bodies and nourish ourselves in a balanced way. But maybe you have recently gotten some blood work done that showed results of high blood pressure or cholesterol. Maybe you have diabetes, pre-diabetes, and there's these doctors who are making you feel like there's this urgent need for you to either lose weight or quote unquote gain control of your eating. And inevitably, of course, that's so stressful for you. And you can quickly get pulled back into, okay, I have to go on a diet, or I have to eat less. I have to cut out carbs. I have to be mindful of how many sweets I have. And that can just pull you back into that mentality that got you to where you are today. And one of the sayings that I want you to hear is that what got you here won't get you to where you want to be. So if this year-long, decade-long cycle of dieting and trying to control your food has led you to a point where you really struggle with overeating, you think about food all the time, you have this all or nothing mentality, you can be quote unquote good for a few days or all week, but then you lose control at night, you lose control all the weekends, you have cheat meals, and it just feels like this really lack of trust, inconsistent, unbalanced way of eating. Why would we continue doing the thing that got you to that place? And I know that there is this conditioned belief that you might have that you're the problem. It's not the diets that got you to where you are. You're the problem. You're weak. You're undisciplined. And of course you feel that way. That's what diet culture has been feeding you your entire life. That if you can't stick to this unsustainable way of eating, if inevitably you fall off the wagon and you struggle with binge eating, then it's your fault. Diet culture will sell you a solution to a problem that they caused, that they created. So there's so many different beliefs that we would want to dive into because number one, understanding that if you struggle with food, if you feel like you're impulsive, you don't make the most nourishing choices, you turn to the easy, convenient options, maybe you eat more sweets, eat more carbs than you would like to, and it's affecting your health, there's a reason why you got to this point. So we have this belief that, okay, if I'm now experiencing health concerns, I need to control my eating more. And that's like saying, imagine that you have a child who grew up in a very strict, rigid household where there were way too many rules and they weren't allowed to experience this freedom and do what they want and make some mistakes. So then by the time this kid turns 13, 14, what do you think happens? They start rebelling. They see their friends who are able to go to the movie theater on a Friday night or to hang out on the weekends. And that child feels like, I want to be able to do that. And I grew up my entire life being told that this is just the way it is. You're not allowed to do that. So when you grew up with too many rules, you become rebellious. You might start sneaking out of the house. You might start causing problems, even doing things to get attention, to get in trouble. Maybe you're smoking at school, right? So we hear these stories all the time. So then you've got these parents who are noticing, oh my goodness, little Bob here. I don't know why I use the word Bob. It's the first name that come up for me. So little Bob here is getting out of control. He's getting out of hand. So I'm just going to add more rules. We're just going to punish him. We're not going to allow him to see his friends. We're just going to get him to be at home all the time. Is that going to fix the problem? Or is it only going to make the rebellious attitude worse? Probably that second option, right? So now Bob is going to rebel even more. He's going to fight with his parents. And over time, you're just going to make things so much worse. So I want you to think about how this plays out in your own relationship with food. If you have gotten to a point where there's a lot of rebellious energy, oh, you tell me I shouldn't eat that. Well, if I eat one cookie, then I'm just going to eat the entire sleeve. If there's this scarcity that once you start eating, well, I've already broken my rule. I've already ruined a good day of eating. So I'm just going to eat as much as I can now and I'll be better tomorrow. These are the reasons this scarcity, this restriction, this mindset of dieting, these are the reasons why you're struggling with food and why it might be affecting your health. So we don't want to ask ourselves, how can I control my eating even more? Because we know that dieting is one of the leading causes of binge eating, emotional eating, overeating, a difficulty having more variety in your diet, making nutritious choices from a place of I truly want to versus from a place of I should. If these are the things that are causing your issues and your challenges with food in the first place, why would we continue and go back down that route that's only going to get you to the same exact place that got you here? So I know that especially when you get a health diagnosis or you start getting concerned, then you want to do something that's going to make you feel relieved and make you feel better right now. Okay, if I start limiting carbs or if I count calories or if I cut out sugar, then I feel like I'm doing something for my health. I feel like I'm taking action. But ask yourself, how sustainable is that really? If you can't see yourself being 60, 70, 80, 90 years old, still avoiding sugar or cutting out carbs, then how long is that going to last until inevitably you have these crazy sugar cravings because you haven't had it in weeks, or all you're thinking about is carbs, and then you go to a party, you go to a wedding, and there's all of these foods that you haven't been allowing yourself to have. And then once you start eating, you can't stop. You start binging, then you feel like crap afterwards. You tell yourself you're going to be better tomorrow. And then before you know it, you've thrown yourself back into the restrict and binge cycle all over again. So we really have to look at the questions that we ask ourselves. when we get that blood work back, where we start feeling stressed or anxious about our health, the question is not, how do I gain control of my eating habits? Because, of course, that's just going to throw you right back into what got you here. The real question is, how do I address the real reasons why, the root causes of why I'm struggling with food in the first place? So, really, it's not what do I need to eat, but why am I eating in this certain way? And when you really look underneath the surface, you look at the mindsets, the thought patterns, the beliefs, the emotions, the habits that are driving your overeating or your challenges with making nourishing choices, then, only then, will you be able to establish a healthy foundation of a healthy relationship with food that's going to naturally lead to improved food choices, naturally lead to you being able to stop when you're full. We have to address this all or nothing mentality, this scarcity, this inability to listen to our bodies, to stop when we're full. We have to address these subconscious hidden drivers of our challenges with food. You cannot build a house on quicksand. And if you don't have that foundation, if you don't really understand yourself and what drives you to turn to food, then anything that you try to do will only be a band-aid solution. And just like you cannot wear a band-aid forever before it falls off, then just addressing the what do I eat or how much do I eat without addressing the why am I struggling, it's only going to be temporary. And we know that it's going to make your relationship with food worse in the long run. So really, the beautiful news is that pursuing intuitive eating and looking at the root causes of your relationship with food, that's really what we do inside of FFA 2.0, right? Like we have this 4-pillar process that looks at the 4 main drivers of your food obsession, your binge and emotional eating, your guilt, and your shame, so that you heal them one at a time. And yes, it does require you to slow down, and it does require you to be willing to take a look at yourself. But what's the other solution? That you keep wasting another 5 or 10 or 20 years just doing quick fix after quick fix after quick fix, not really feeling like you can live your life, not really feeling like you're making positive progress, always feeling like you're failure because you can't stick to anything. So really taking the time to look at yourself, to understand, okay, how do I really reconnect to my body? How do I learn the signals that my body is sending me? How do I become an expert on what my specific unique body needs? How do I look at the emotional triggers that lead me to eat when I'm not hungry, that lead me to eat when I'm stressed or bored or lonely or anxious? How can I rewire the thoughts in my brain that trigger guilt-driven overeating, the shame, the F it, I've already ruined my day, might as well just eat everything and start again tomorrow? How can I establish healthier habits that are consistent and fit into my lifestyle? Those are the things that matter. And the good news is that when you really become an intuitive eater, then those choices that you were worried about when it comes to portion control or carbs or sugar, they just naturally solve themselves. I think of one of my clients inside of FFA, and she had this exact same fear of how can I address these health concerns while also eating intuitively? And we worked through that together. And she sent me a message last week saying, wow, I never realized that now that I have rebuilt this trust with my body and with myself, and I know that I can have these foods whenever I want, whether that's a sandwich or sweets or baked goods, I don't want them as much. And when I do have them, it only takes me a little bit to be satisfied because you're taking these foods off of their pedestal. This is called habituation. So think of when you get a new car. It's very exciting. It smells really good, but over time, the smell, you get used to it and you're just not as excited because you've had it for a while. The first time you say, I love you to your partner, it's super exciting. You get butterflies in your stomach. And then over time, it's still really nice to hear, but it doesn't have the same kind of effect on you because the more you expose yourself to a food, and I want to really make sure that there's a caveat here, exposing yourself to a food guilt-free. So even if you're thinking, I eat this food all the time, but you're filled with guilt and you have a thought that you shouldn't be eating it, you're interfering with that habituation effect. So what we really do inside of FFA is you learn how to be around these foods, expose yourself to these foods, and change the way that you speak to yourself and the way that you think and your emotions around it so that it becomes no big deal. And then what happens is that you're able to really pay attention to what foods feel good for you. You might notice that a bowl or a salad or a stir fry gives you more energy. You feel more focused. You feel better in your body. And because it's not this choice of, okay, either I have this salad, which is a quote unquote good food or allowed food, or I have this other food that I'm not supposed to have, but it's here and it's offered to me. This might be my only opportunity to have it. So I'm going to have it now because who knows when I'm going to allow myself to have it again. Well, now you're making choices not from a place of what feels good for my body, but from a place of this like chaotic energy of I have to have it now. So when you release and you remove that chaotic energy around food, you can slow things down, you can feel more at peace, and you can make choices that you know make you feel good. And yes, you can have the treats, but it doesn't lead into a binge. So really what I'm trying to convey here is that when you become an intuitive eater, when you heal your relationship with food, when you address the root causes of your food obsession and overeating and cravings, you don't need to rely on control. You don't need to rely on willpower or discipline. I laugh when people who don't really know me will look at the way that I eat and they'll say things like, you have so much willpower. I think of, we have a friend group and a few of them love candy so much, which is great. Like, go for it. And we'll be hanging out and they'll have like a bunch of bags of candy and I'll have like 3 or 4 pieces and then I'm good. And at first they would look at me and think, how do you have so much willpower? And to try to explain that I'm not using willpower. I'm happy to have a few pieces, but I know that if I have more, I know my body. I know I'm not going to feel good. So it's really not worth it to me. And I can have this candy again tomorrow if I want to. I can have it the day after. It's really not a big deal for me. So I don't need to use restraint or willpower. I'm just focusing on how can I enjoy this food while also feeling good in my body. And those two things can happen simultaneously. And really, once you look at what's driving you underneath the surface, you won't have to rely on willpower either. So when it comes to these health concerns, maybe you think, I need to eat less carbs or I need to eat less sweets. Telling yourself just to eat less of those things is only going to make you want them more, right? We want what we can't have. So we need to retrain our brain so that it's not about how do I want less of these things, but it just naturally happens because you're focused on what's going to make me feel good. You're focused on your long-term goals. You have this relationship of freedom and of peace around food instead of scarcity and urgency. So the biggest message behind all of this is I get it. I get it that it can be stressful and it can be hard to understand how intuitive eating, because, there's all these misconceptions that intuitive eating is food freedom, eat whatever you want, whenever you want, without regards to health. And that's the furthest thing from the truth, because intuitive eating is the best way to take care of your health. I have never felt healthier. I have never felt happier. Eating has never felt easier for me than after really becoming an intuitive eater and healing my relationship with food, because then it becomes natural. So I do understand that it can be hard because there is a lot of misconceptions around intuitive eating, but I want you to think about the people that you might know and admire and look at who are intuitive eaters, who don't have to worry about food, who are able to leave food on their plate, who don't binge on candy or binge on sweets. They can have a few pieces of cake and just walk away. You have to look at those people, and instead of asking yourself, what are they eating? What kind of willpower are they exerting? Really asking yourself, what is their relationship with food? How do they think about food? What are their emotions around food? What are some of their habits, the way that they approach eating? And that will give you so much more of an insight of what you need to look at internally and rewire so that you can create this long-term lifestyle that feels good for you, that really addresses your health, your well-being, while also being able to enjoy food. So if you could relate to today's conversation, you feel stuck between a rock and a hard place where you want to tend to your health, but you don't want to get pulled back into dieting because deep down that's only going to make things worse, but you have no idea what the process of going underneath the surface and addressing the root causes of your challenges with food could look like. And you have maybe been trying to figure it out on your own for a really long time, trying to piece it together without really clear directions. Because let's be real, I spent the last 5 years studying and researching and putting together so much information that I gathered from probably 1,000 different sources in order to make it into a clear step-by-step roadmap. It's not easy to consolidate all this information and to know, okay, what's the most important things? Where do I start? What do I do next? In what order? So if you could figure it out on your own, you would have done it by now. And you want to make it easier and simpler for yourself. You don't want to waste any more of your time and of your energy feeling stuck, being frustrated, and repeating the same cycles over and over again, missing out on life and affecting your physical, mental, emotional health in the process. Then I invite you to check out Food Freedom Academy 2.0. This is where you will literally have the step-by-step process. Like I said, you're getting the past 5 years of me being obsessed with learning what it takes to heal and to change permanently creating a lasting transformation in your life and consolidating all of that information into a straightforward process. So you can find all of the information on Food Freedom Academy 2.0 in the show notes. And I also think the URL is sabrinamagnon.com/FFA. So you can find all of the information on the program in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you so much. Come over to hang out with me on Instagram at sabrinamagnon.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show so that you don't miss any of the new podcast episode releases. And I will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magnon Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode.